Appreciating biblical poetry, its universal characteristics. The poems of the Bible have been an inspiration to God's people for millennia. Yet our appreciation is deepened when we recognize the poetic devices that make them beautiful, what it is that makes them poetic. In this post, we review the key characteristics of biblical poetry that are common for all poetry, ancient and modern. These characteristics are figurative language, imagery, repetition, and allusions, as shown in this figure. In a future post, we will cover the characteristics that are unique to biblical poetry. Figurative language. Figurative language is the use of figures of speech, such as metaphors and similes, to convey a message. Shakespeare's As You Like It contains a well-known metaphor where he wrote, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages." The world is not literally a stage. A stage is a metaphor for the world, and Shakespeare goes on to describe the ways in which we are actors playing many parts on that stage. Instead of describing human life in abstract terms, Shakespeare described them metaphorically as 7 acts of a play. Poetry also uses similes, where something is likened to something else. Similes can be powerful poetic devices. For example, in his poem Daffodils, Wordsworth begins with a simile. "I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils." Wordsworth didn't write, "I was very lonely." Rather, he compared himself to a wandering cloud floating aimlessly over the land, when suddenly he saw a field of daffodils, which comforted him. How poetic is that? The Bible is full of figurative language. For example, in Psalm 18:2, David uses 5 metaphors for God. "The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge. My shield, and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold." In just this one verse, God is David's rock, his fortress, his shield, the horn of his salvation, and his stronghold. How all-inclusive is our God to us. The book of Psalms begins with simile, contrasting one whose delight is in the law of the Lord with one who is wicked. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. So also Deborah's song in Judges 5 ends with a beautiful simile. "So may all your enemies perish, Lord, but may all those who love you be like the sun when it rises in its strength." Figurative language is seen also in the New Testament. For example, Jesus said, "I am the vine, you are the branches." Here, a vine and its branches are a beautiful metaphor for believers abiding in Christ, sharing his life and bearing fruit, which is the outward manifestation of Christ's life in us. This passage also uses pruning of the branches as a metaphor for the role of suffering, which God uses so that believers may bear more fruit. Moreover, most of Jesus' parables use metaphors and similes, which make them poetic and memorable. For example, "You are the salt of the earth." "The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner," and "the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed." The apostles also use figurative language. For example, Peter used a simile to describe the transient nature of human life. He wrote, "All flesh is as grass, and all the glory of man as the flower of grass. The grass withers, and its flower falls away." So much of the New Testament is written in figurative language, with metaphors and similes sprinkled throughout, even in passages of prose, making them poetic. Imagery. It is often said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Imagery uses words to paint a mental picture or to call to mind a sensory experience. So poets use imagery to pack intense meaning and feeling into their verse with just a few words. For example, Robert Frost's poem, Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening, is beautiful in its imagery. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. For anyone who has lived in northern climates, this short poem immediately recalls the feeling of a quiet snowy night in the darkness of winter. Similarly, Psalm 23 paints a pastoral scene of a shepherd and his sheep. Here we see green pastures, still waters, and the shepherd's rod and staff, with the shepherd lovingly providing all the needs of the sheep while protecting them. It begins, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake." Psalm 42 begins with a beautiful simile for one who longs for God. As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When can I go and meet with God? Repetition. Repetition is a simple but powerful poetic device, found often in poems, ancient and modern. Martin Luther King's 1963 speech at the Lincoln Memorial includes what is essentially a poem toward the end, with its repetition 9 times of the phrase, "I have a dream." That section begins, "And so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood," and so forth. But King is not done. A few moments later, he does it again with another poetic repetition, this time with the phrase, "Let freedom ring." King's full speech can be found online. It is well worth reading in its entirety. His use of repetition makes it one of the greatest and most poetic speeches in modern American history. Like modern poetry, the Bible also uses repetition as a poetic device. The first book of the Bible uses repetition in the story of creation for each day of the week. So essentially, the Bible begins with a poem. It begins, "And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, 'Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water.' So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. God called the vault sky, and there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. Each day then follows this construction, making these verses beautiful and memorable. The Psalms also use repetition as a poetic device. For example, Psalm 121 repeats the word keep 6 times in 6 verses. The Hebrew word is also translated guard, protect, and preserve in other versions. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in, from this time forth and forevermore. In the New Testament, Jesus made use of repetition in the Beatitudes in Matthew 5, where verses 3 to 11 begin with the word blessed are and ending with for they or theirs, giving them a beautiful repetitive structure. Here are just verses 3 through 6. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they that hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians is mostly prose, but there is at least one beautiful poem within it, chapter 13, even though it is not marked as poetry in most versions. And its repetitive structure, a series of declarative statements about what love is and does versus what it is not and does not, is what makes it poetic. It begins, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Allusions. Allusions are references to specific places, people, events, or other things. Allusions are one of the richest characteristics of poetry. They are especially powerful when the poet and the reader share an understanding of the reference. For example, Lee Greenwood's song, God Bless the USA, includes references to United States geography that are allusions to the vastness and beauty of this great country. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston, and New York to LA. Well, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say, I'm proud to be an American. So also the Bible is full of allusions within the Old Testament itself and in New Testament allusions to the Old Testament. For example, Mary's song, the Magnificat, in Luke 1:46-55, is rich with biblical allusions, although many readers don't realize it. As I pointed out in a recent post, Mary is referencing over 10 passages in the Old Testament, including 1 Samuel, Genesis, Psalms, Job, and Isaiah. Take a few minutes to compare Mary's song with her allusions to the Old Testament. Recognizing them greatly increases our appreciation of Mary's song. If a New Testament passage is quoting the Old Testament, look up those Old Testament verses. But you can also go the other way. For example, Psalm 118:22 says, "The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone." This verse is quoted 5 times in the New Testament, referring to Christ. For example, in Matthew, Acts, and in 1 Peter. Look up those New Testament references and it will deepen your appreciation of Psalm 118. Appreciating the universal characteristics of biblical poetry. These universal characteristics, figurative language, imagery, repetition, and allusions, enrich the poems of the Bible, making them denser and packed with more meaning than simple prose. Much like the taste of a few raisins is more powerful than the taste of bunches of grapes. Notice a simile there. Therefore, to deepen your appreciation of biblical poetry, take more time to savor them. When you find a metaphor or simile, think, how is the one thing like the other? For example, how is man's glory like the flower in the field? When you encounter imagery, take time to picture the scene. For example, in reading Psalm 42, picture a thirsty deer in the heat of the midday sun, perhaps escaping a predator, and then coming upon a cool stream of water. When you see a word or phrase that is repeated, use it to help memorize the passage and call it to mind throughout the day. You'll find the repetition makes it easier to remember. Allusions offer the richest opportunity. When you spot one, look up the reference. Make use of a good study Bible or trustworthy reference book such as Matthew Henry. If the reference is to a place, where is it? What is it known for? If it is a person, who is it? And what makes him or her notable? If it is an event, what happened? One way to slow down your reading of the poems of the Bible, or any poem for that matter, is to read them out loud. Read them to yourself or to others dramatically, getting a feel for the figures of speech, the imagery, the repetitions, and the allusions. This will make them come alive in your spirit and in your heart.